Texas A&M at Tennessee. Tennessee favored by 3.5 points at the crib, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. For Texas A&M now, could get loud quick. Could get very loud very quick. I don't just mean about Neyland Stadium being deafening. That's a very, very real possibility. We got to be in there for the blackout game, and it was crazy. But if they lose 2 in a row, have the loss to Bama, have the loss to Tennessee, that good faith that was sort of built back up from the last couple of games before Alabama starts to dwindle. We know it's a very flammable situation in College Station. It kind of is what it is. And I'm not saying Jimbo Fisher gets fired. I'm not saying that the seat gets hot or whatever. I'm just saying like the conversation around his job becomes increasingly uncomfortable. Now for Tennessee, this is another building block for them of what we call the new Tennessee. Because Tennessee last year, it was Hendon Hooker dealing and throwing the ball all around the yard to Jalen Hyatt, and they were explosive play city. Like, they still have that, I think, in the back pocket. I think they're still trying to hone that. But what we saw against South Carolina for Tennessee, it's an edgy Tennessee team, man. It's a Tennessee team that wants to push you around. They want to run the football. They want to work some quick game and keep you honest. But, like, as a whole, man, like, they want to be the bully. They take pride in being the bully. We got to be down there on the sideline and watch Tennessee bully South Carolina up and down the field. It was an edge for that football team. So with this new Tennessee, I think they're trying to still provide some proof of concept. And I think there's a lot of confidence in-house. I think that's still who they are. But I think some of it, too, is proving it to yourself week in and week out. And A&M is going to have a really good front seven, which we'll talk about here in a second. But, like, if you can play that edgy style of football against Texas A&M, and be successful with it and win a football game with it, like, what can't you do the rest of the way? I think that's got to be the thought process for Tennessee coming out of this game and, heck, even going into this game. Now, a big matchup for us. Joe Milton, quarterback for Tennessee, against this pass rush of Texas A&M. The pass rush that we're talking about for A&M, best in the country. Best in the country. Have a sack rate of, wait for it, 15%. That means 15% of the snaps that Texas A&M is playing defensively, they're getting to the quarterback. Not just providing pressure, not just knocking him down, like they are sacking the quarterback 15% of the time. Had 7 sacks against Arkansas, had 6 sacks against Alabama. So yeah, they got some guys that can get after you a little bit. Now for Joe Milton, the task in this game, the mission is this game, diagnose like a doctor, deliver like a midwife. That's what it's got to be for Joe Milton. We got to see the pressure before it even happens. We got to see the alignment. We got to feel the pressure. And then we got to find the open spot right away. We got to find our safety valve. We got to find the deep shot if it's there. Because I think there will be some deep plays to be had. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute as well. But Texas A&M, at best, if they get to Joe Milton, could create some tough third downs. Like, just as a head coach, you don't have a ton of plays in the playbook for 3rd and 17. You got a couple, but you only have so many. You don't want to live in 3rd and long. On the other side of things, at worst, it could create some negative decisions by Joe Milton, could cause him to put the ball in harm's way. We could see some turnovers. Like, if they're able to pressure Joe Milton and he's not able to see and process the defense and make the right decision consistently, heck, execute the right decision consistently, I mean, put that out there, that'd be a situation you'd like to live in if you're Texas A&M. Now, for Joe Milton, going back to what we said, if he's able to process the defense quickly, if he's able to feel it right away, and going back to that key word, execute, I think this receiving core of Tennessee has to have an advantage over this A&M secondary. Like, we saw what happened last week, right, with Alabama. We saw what they were able to get done. Isaiah Bond had a big day. Jermaine Burton had a big day. Like, 2 receivers that you probably knew about for Alabama, but you never really thought they were going to be like game breakers for Bama. Well, that's what they were last week. So it's going to be crucial for them to separate and to be able to provide some explosives in that way. Now, it falls back on Joe Milton on executing, and I think the intermediate pass game, too, will have to be a part of this. Like, we can't see Joe Milton we saw in the Swamp in Gainesville. We can't see Florida Joe Milton where he's missing on the 10-yard pass and the 15-yard pass. Like, we got to be dialed in all the way down the field. But especially on those deep passes, we got to be able to hit when money's on the table, because I think money will be on the table a fair amount for Tennessee. Now, Tim Banks, defensive coordinator for Tennessee, and dealing with the multiple playmakers that Texas A&M has, Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Anaya Smith. Like, you just go down the list here. There's no shortage of ballers for A&M that can hurt you when the ball's in their hands. How do you go about dealing with that? Because the issue with A&M having so many weapons is it's tough to give the proper amount of attention to each of them. And when you're not able to effectively distribute resources across the board to guard this number of playmakers, it's a matter of time before one of them hurts you. And so I think if A&M is able to do that, well, then you put pressure on the Tennessee offense to match scores. And I think that there's this firepower from Texas A&M we haven't seen just yet. And if you want to even dial it back and say, okay, maybe they don't have to match scores, at the very least, you keep Tennessee guessing defensively with what Texas A&M does offensively. Could be a long day for the Vols. You don't want to be wondering where that next punch is coming from if you're Tennessee. Now, here's the thing I would do if I'm Tennessee. And this is way easier said than done from this chair sitting behind a microphone than it is being on the grass and having to coach it up. But philosophically, my thought process would have to be, how do we isolate the problems? And what I mean by that is you can't allow it to be a thing where you just do a bunch of things good and not a number of things great, or not one thing great. Like, if your attention is divided across the board, I think you have issues defensively if you're Tennessee. Like, if I'm Tennessee, it's about attacking. Like, they have a top 10 sack rate in their own right, does Tennessee, right around 11%. Let's get after Max Johnson. Let's make him uncomfortable. Alabama was really successful last week defensively when they started to force the issue against Max Johnson and speed up that shot clock. I think there's going to be some plays to be made for Tennessee defensively as well. Like, let's not just sit back and let him sort of play 7-on-7 and pick us apart and allow there for time for Evan Stewart to get open and Anaya Smith to get open and Jake Johnson to get open. Like, the more you can speed up the shot clock and force him to put the ball in harm's way and force him to make throws before he's ready to make a throw, that's going to favor Tennessee. And when I say isolate the issue, that's one way to do it, to speed up the shot clock on the quarterback. But also, like, if we got to give it extra attention to Evan Stewart, so be it. Like, if that's the issue and that's the matchup we feel least confident in, let's take away Evan Stewart. Hey, if Moose Muhammad beats us, so be it. I think they need to pick and choose which matchups they want to be really great at, and other matchups they say, hey, we got to live one-on-one here. Maybe not consistently, but down to down, we got to live one-on-one here. I'm curious to see how they address that, but it'll be telling, to say the least. Now, I think one of the biggest things in this game is, can anyone run the football in this game? Can anyone move the line of scrimmage? Because we talk so much about what both teams can do in the pass game and the weapons they have. And I mean, Jimbo Fisher already talked about Squirrel White for Tennessee and compared him to a legitimate squirrel, which I think is hilarious. And I don't think he's incorrect in that assessment with how versatile and agile Squirrel White is. But if either team's able to run the football, it would do a couple of things. One, it would probably surprise all of us because A&M is allowing 2.6 yards a carry. Tennessee's allowing 3.3 yards a carry, so both pretty solid. It would mellow out the defense. It would mellow out the ability for either team to bring pressure, because when you want to bring pressure against a run, you better get home on that. You better make sure that you're making that tackle or that you're rushing the correct lane, because if you don't, there's nobody behind you. You can't swing and miss. That running back's out the back door for however many yards. Probably a lot is the assumption there. So it mellow out the defense. Also, it would unlock the rest of the offense. Going back to what we said about A&M being able to get Tennessee off balance. If either team's able to run the football effectively, that would put either defense off balance, keep them in guessing mode, be able to live ahead of the sticks, live in 2nd and 5, live in 3rd and 2. That would be, I promise you, the situation both offenses would like to live in. Finally, helps out the quarterback. Joe Milton, tons of tools. We expect big things from him, but we haven't really seen it just yet. Max Johnson, I think he's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the country, but still, he's been a backup quarterback until this point where he was thrust into action with Connor Wegman going down with an injury. So any way you're able to just take something off your quarterback's plate, that would be the way that you would like to live if you're either side. So just full transparency here, y'all, I don't feel good about this pick. Don't feel good about this pick. Was working on it for the majority of yesterday in terms of thinking it through and then putting pen to paper this morning. Like, don't feel great about this pick. Could see this game going either way. Here's my concern. With Tennessee, I cannot flush the memory of what I saw Florida do to them up front. Like, I can't. I have issues with how I saw them respond to what Florida did in the front seven. I have issues with how I saw them tackle against Florida. Like, the physicality that Florida brought and Tennessee didn't gives me concern. Now, we saw South Carolina in that game, and we saw them play much more physical, but I have the sneaking suspicion that the A&M front seven is going to bring it and provide pressure on Joe Milton. And as well as Joe Milton has played to this point in the year, there's still been, I think, a little bit more to be desired. I haven't seen that consistency from him. Now, he could very well step out there and drop dimes like we saw Jalen Milroe do last week. And he could have a career day, and that wouldn't shock me. But it would be a little bit more new than what we've seen from him this season. I think the playmakers of A&M are dangerous in space. I think they have a little bit more under the hood than what they're being given credit for. I'm sure Nealon will be rocking. How they handle that will be a very, very big factor. But at the end of the day, this is a game won up front. And I think A&M defensively has more up front in this game. And they're going to force Joe Milton to be consistent and execute consistently in the intermediate pass game, in the deep pass game. There's going to be big plays to be had. But for me, I like A&M to win this football game 31-27. Could be back and forth. Could be a matter of who gets the ball last. Could be last second. I don't know. Again, I don't feel good about it. Do not feel good about picking this one. But I think A&M wins this football game and walks out victorious on Saturday. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.